The EMF meters screamed in unison, every single light flashing critical red. The temperature plunged so fast their breath turned to fog. And then they saw him, not 20 feet away in the gap between two boulders, the flickering form of a young man in a tattered Confederate uniform. He looked real, too real, but he shimmered at the edges like a corrupted video file. Rochelle watched as his body stuttered. 1 second, he was standing there whole. The next, a cannonball-sized hole blown clean through his chest, splintered ribs, viscera. The wound appeared. He fell. The image froze, buzzed, distorted. Then he was standing again, whole. The death loop started over. It was a broken record of a soul's worst possible moment. Welcome to Lady E's Dark Tales. I'm Rex Barker. That footage, that moment of profound cosmic horror, yeah, that actually happened at Gettysburg in October 2022. And tonight we're diving into exactly how a group of clout-chasing goblins, desperate for viral fame, kicked down a door that was absolutely not meant to be opened. The story revolves around a young woman named Rochelle Kimbrough, and in the autumn of 2022, this aspiring influencer with a brain smoother than a bowling ball led her friends into the middle of a wound that has never closed. They went looking for content, demanding that the dead perform tricks for their cameras. But some places aren't a soundstage, and some ghosts don't give a damn about your subscriber count. This is about consequences. It's about a haunting born from pure, uncut disrespect. A haunting that became a cage. You see, Rochelle demanded a sign from the souls buried in that blood-soaked ground. And oh boy, did she get one. She wanted proof. The dead delivered. And what they gave her was something she'll carry for the rest of her life. Before getting to the main event of idiocy, you need to understand the ground they were standing on. Gettysburg. The name itself is basically a synonym for mass grave. For 3 days in July 1863, two armies turned the place into a human meat grinder, leaving over 50,000 casualties. The ground literally drank agony, terror, and thousands of final, gurgling breaths. And within this giant open-air tomb, there's a spot called Devil's Den. It's a chaotic pile of gigantic, ancient boulders that look like they were put there to be menacing. On July 2nd, 1863, the second day of the battle, this place became an abject slaughterhouse. Confederate sharpshooters used the rocks for cover, methodically popping off Union soldiers on the hills above. Men from Texas and Georgia went hand to hand with guys from New York and Maine. The fighting was so close and brutal, it was described as the area being alive with burning powder. For hours, it was just non-stop gunfire and screaming as bodies tumbled into the crevices between the rocks, left to bleed out in the summer heat. When the battle moved on, the dead were left there for days. Their terror and pain were seared into the stones themselves. Paranormal circles call this a residual haunting. Think of it less like a thinking, conscious spirit and more like a psychic scar. It's an endless recording of a horrific moment, a PTSD-fueled GIF of pure agony stuck on repeat. This is not a playground, it's a monument to suffering. But to Rochelle Kimbrough and her band of morons, it was a stage. She was a local college student whose only real ambition was to go viral for doing absolutely nothing of value. The plan was garbage tier simple. Get undeniable proof of a ghost on camera. So they showed up with their ghost hunting starter pack from Amazon, EMF meters, digital recorders, cameras. Not with respect, but like props for a movie they thought they were directing. And for the grand finale, the cherry on top of this shit Sunday, they brought a Ouija board. They snuck into the park late, long after closing, their obnoxious laughter echoing in a place that deserved silence. They weren't just trespassing on park property, they were trespassing on memory. And Rochelle, the ringleader of this circus, set up her camera with a massive, punchable grin on her face. This wasn't a sight of tragedy to her, it was a backdrop. And her friends were loud, joking around in the crushing quiet of the battlefield, completely oblivious to the weight of the history under their feet. They were there to poke a mass grave with a selfie stick and ask it to do a little dance for their TikTok. The séance started just before 11 p.m. on October 30th. They slapped the Ouija board down on a flat boulder that Rochelle designated centre stage. For a half hour, nothing. Their pathetic taunts asking if anyone was there, demanding the spirits show them something and not be shy, were met with the silence they deserved. Frustration began to set in. One of them whined that this was lame, that they thought this place was supposed to be legit. And that's when Rochelle's ambition curdled into pure galaxy-brained arrogance. She stood up and screamed into the darkness. She yelled that this was their last chance to perform, to show them something. Or they were calling this whole place a joke. She was yelling at the dead like they were a fast food employee who got her order wrong. And something answered. It wasn't a whisper. It was a sudden sickening plunge in temperature. The air went thick and heavy, tasting of stale misery. The EMF meters, which had been dead quiet, suddenly shrieked in unison, every single light flashing critical red. One of their cameras just fried itself. Then they saw him. Not 20 feet away, in a gap between two giant boulders, was the flickering, semi-transparent form of a young man in a tattered Confederate uniform. He looked disturbingly real, solid enough that you could make out the texture of the fabric, the buttons on his jacket, the dirt caked on his boots. But he shimmered at the edges like a corrupted video file, his outline flickering in and out of existence. For maybe 5 seconds, the soldier just stood there, perfectly still, staring at nothing. His face was young. Couldn't have been more than 19, 20 years old. Then the glitch hit. His body jerked violently like someone had yanked him on invisible strings. 1 second he was standing there whole. The next, a cannonball-sized hole blown clean through his chest, revealing splintered ribs and a spray of pixelated viscera. Where his organs used to be, you could see straight through him to the rocks behind. The friends were frozen, their jokes dying in their throats. The temperature had dropped so fast their breath was coming out, in thick clouds. This wasn't the Casper the friendly ghost they wanted for their YouTube channel. This was raw, unfiltered agony, the last moment of a boy's life playing on repeat for over a century and a half. The figure raised a hand, reaching toward them, or maybe towards something only he could see. His face was a mask of silent, looping terror. His mouth was open in a scream they couldn't hear. Then the glitch happened again, more violently. The image stuttered, rewound a half second and played forward. The soldier's body convulsed as an invisible projectile tore him open. He started to fall, but his body froze mid-air, suspended in that moment of death, a silent scream carved on his face. The image buzzed, distorted. Static crawled across his form like digital insects. And then he was standing again, whole. The wound appeared. He convulsed. He fell. He froze. The loop repeated. Again and again. 6 times they watched the boy die in the exact same way. His terror fresh each time like it was happening for the first time. It was a broken record of a soul's worst possible moment, and they just forced it to play for an audience. Rochelle tried to scream, but her throat just closed up. And as the soldier's glitched form lunged, not at the group, but right at her camera, right at her, the world shattered. The air split with the eardrum-shattering roar of 100 muskets firing at once, the smell of gunpowder and hot, coppery blood choking them. Her friends absolutely shit themselves and scattered, screaming in pure terror. Rochelle was the last to run, her brain blue-screening from the sheer cosmic horror she had just downloaded directly into her eyeballs. She demanded a sign. The broken memory of a dying boy had just given her one. Rochelle and her crew got out of Devil's Den that night, but something followed. The recording, that psychic scar burned into the stones for over 150 years, had been dormant, looping in place. But when Rochelle screamed her demand, when she used the Ouija board to force contact, when she stood there with her camera and treated sacred ground like a soundstage, she created a link. She became the new medium. The residual haunting yanked itself from the battlefield and latched onto her. Not because the soldier chose to follow her. There's no consciousness there, no thinking spirit making decisions. It's still just a recording. But now it plays on her instead of the rocks. She became the VCR. It was no longer a haunting of a battlefield. It was the haunting of a person. At first it was small, the faint smell of gunpowder and rotting meat in her dorm room at 3 a.m. A sudden, unexplained cold spot on a warm day that made her breath fog. Then it got worse. She'd hear the wet crack of a musket shot right by her ear in the middle of class and spin around to find nothing. Her professor asked if she was okay. She couldn't explain. She started seeing him in reflections. A shop window while walking to campus. The glitching, mangled corpse of the soldier would flash for a second, his jaw unhinged in a silent scream, before vanishing. In her bathroom mirror while brushing her teeth, in her phone screen, in the rearview mirror of her car while driving on the highway at night, she swerved so hard she nearly crashed into the guardrail. That's when her friends, her partners in crime, bailed. They were terrified of the energy that now clung to her like a shroud. Nobody wanted to be around when the temperature dropped and that smell of death rolled in. The video they uploaded brought them nothing but ridicule. Comments calling it fake, demanding better special effects. Rochelle couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she'd feel the crushing weight of the soldier's final moments. The terror, the pain, the shock of the cannonball tearing through his chest. She'd wake up screaming, her roommate pounding on the door, asking if she was okay. She dropped out after 6 weeks, couldn't focus in class, couldn't explain why she kept flinching at nothing, why she was constantly exhausted, why she looked like she'd aged 5 years in a month. She looked for help. Priests, paranormal investigators, psychics. They did every ritual in the book. Sage, salt, holy water, exorcism prayers. Nothing worked. Because how do you banish a memory? How do you exorcise a historical recording that's now using your soul as a VCR? The soldier isn't haunting her because he's angry or has unfinished business. He's haunting her because she demanded he perform. And now the performance never stops. The frequency increased. At first it was once a day, then twice. By month 3, the death loop was playing every few hours. She'd be at the grocery store reaching for cereal, and suddenly she'd smell gunpowder and see him in the chrome of the shelf, convulsing, falling, freezing midair with that scream carved on his face. She'd be at a job interview and feel the temperature plunge, her breath fogging, and have to excuse herself while the interviewer looked at her like she was losing her mind. She was. Kind of. Sleep deprivation does that. So does watching a teenager die violently every few hours for months on end with no way to make it stop. The haunting is now a permanent glitch in her life. A stalker she can never report to the police. The soldier's death loop plays at random. In her bedroom, in her car, at the coffee shop, at her parents' house, in the shower, during conversations with the few friends she has left. Sometimes it's just the crushing weight of his final moments washing over her. Other times, she sees the full, twitching horror of his eviscerated body falling in the corner of her eye. It's a constant, terrifying reminder of her arrogance. A life sentence for being a disrespectful clown. Rochelle Kimbrough found out. She wanted to go viral, and now she's the star of a one-woman show for an audience of one ghost. The performance is just his brutal death, playing on repeat for the rest of her miserable life. Well, that's where this story ends. So, what's the price of a thrill? What are your clicks and views really worth? Rochelle learned the hard way. She demanded a sign from the dead, and they gave her one she'll never escape. Tell me, have you ever encountered something you couldn't explain on sacred ground? What would you have done if you were at Devil's Den that night? If so, drop it in the comments below. And if stories like this make you think twice about where you point a camera, hit that subscribe button. And remember, the dead aren't your circus monkeys. When you stand on hallowed ground and demand a sign, sometimes they give you one. And you'll carry it for the rest of your life.